Hi, my name is Beth, and you're listening to the Canna Fitness and Nutrition Podcast, where we are hanging out at the intersection of fitness, nutrition, and cannabis. Thank you so much for pressing play today. I'm Beth, your personal trainer, cannabis educator, and I'm here to tell you about tolerance today. If you're coming back, welcome back. Thank you so much for listening. I hope this is a interesting session for you today because we're going to talk about tolerance in a way that most people don't think about, right? Tolerance is an adaptation of the body, and your body is very good at adapting. And it's not necessarily a bad thing, and there are definitely some ways you can manage it. So let's talk about that. Now, I used to be afraid of tolerance. I used to think, oh my gosh, am I using too much? I'm going to build up a tolerance and then I'm going to have to buy more and more and more and I'm going to have to take more and more and more and it's going to be expensive and I'm going to have to keep buying. I'm going to be a stoner and all these things. I would worry because I was afraid, right, of tolerance. And that's how a lot of people are. When I was hanging out in dispensaries last year, I would talk to customers and they'd be like, well, those don't work for me. They would like point to a gummy and be like, those don't do anything for me. I don't feel anything on those, right? And I'd be like, how much are you taking? And then this one girl, she was with a friend and her friend chimed in and said, oh, that's because she uses I don't know, it takes so much every day, right? And I was basically like, oh, your tolerance is really high. So, it's not that it's not working. It's working great. It's just that your tolerance is really high, right? Tolerance is an adaptation. Your body adapts to anything that happens repeatedly. This happens with other medications, right? This happens with exercise. This is one of my favorite things about exercise. When you exercise, so say you've started lifting 5-pound weights this week and you started doing bicep curls. In a couple of weeks, say you started doing that like 3 times a week. In a couple of weeks, you're gonna need heavier weights because your body's going to adapt to those 5-pound weights. And then you're gonna need 10-pound weights. And then you're gonna do that 3 times a week for weeks. And then your body's gonna start to adapt to the 10-pound weights. And then you're gonna need 15-pound weights, right? Which is all well and good when you're exercising because you're getting stronger. But when you're using cannabis, now you're like, well, what do I have to do? Take a whole package of gummies? Geez, that's gonna be expensive, right? If you're taking a whole package a day, or you just feel like you're smoking constantly or you're inhaling constantly. Well, let's look at it a couple of different ways. First, I want to just talk about what cannabis tolerance is. And I want to be clear. You know, on this podcast, when I talk about cannabis, I'm talking about both CBD and THC because they come from the same plant, they work really well together, but they have some very distinct differences. And when we talk about cannabis tolerance, we're talking specifically about THC tolerance. This does not apply to CBD. CBD does not create tolerance the way THC does. In fact, adding CBD is one of the ways people manage THC tolerance, not worsen it. And this distinction matters because most people assume all cannabis works the same, but it does not. Let me just give you a tiny little sciencey lesson here about what tolerance is. Tolerance, again, it's an adaptation. It means your body has adapted to repeated THC exposure. It's not a danger signal, right? It's not a panic. It's simply your nervous system is designed to adjust to repeated signals, that just like exercise, right? There are 2 main biological ways this happens. One, the receptors. Now remember, there's receptors all over your body that take the THC and bring it in and do what it's going to do with it. With repeated THC use, the receptors start to what we call hide, right? They kind of pull back inside the cell and make themselves not available. They're like, no, we're done, we're good over here. We don't need you. So they're inside the cell kind of hanging out, right? Fewer receptors available, less intense effects. Or they can hide or they can become less responsive, right? It's almost like they're like partially blocked. Like think of like when your sink, you ever have a sink pipe get kind of like clogged up with like gunk on the inside and then it starts making that like blub 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 sound when the water goes down it because it's not going down smoothly and it's not draining clearly, right? That's kind of like what's happening, right? It's just not activating them fully. It's not clear. Same signal, lower impact. This is just normal physiology, right? Again, this happens with other medications. This happens with other things in the body. So the body's very good at adapting. But here's a scenario, I want you to consider this scenario where, and a fun fact about tolerance, where tolerance can actually be good. So different parts of your brain develop and body develop tolerance at different speeds, right? So you can become tolerant in one area and still very sensitive in another, right? For example, the parts of your brain involved in motor control tend to develop tolerance more quickly. The parts involved in pain processing tend to develop tolerance more slowly. So if someone feels wobbly or off balance, you ever felt like wobbly when you first took THC? Maybe it might have been a while ago, but or maybe you took too much once and you felt really off balance, right? Really wobbly. That's not necessarily, you're not always going to feel that way because that part of your body builds a tolerance, and that's a good thing. So you can become more functional. So say you have a scenario where maybe you have chronic pain, like a fibromyalgia or something, and you love cannabis because it relieves that chronic pain. Well, you want that to not build a tolerance. You don't want the pain part to build a tolerance because you need the relief. But you don't want to be like dysfunctional all day and be falling over and stumbling over your words because you're super high, right? So it's actually pretty cool that your body develops tolerance at different rates, allowing you to be a functional human and not fall down and actually have conversations and have motor control while you're still diminishing your pain, right? I think that's amazing benefit of tolerance. So that's just one way that I think tolerance can be looked at as a good thing, right? And there's so many, and once you hear that, like there's so many scenarios that come to mind where that could be a good thing, right? Say you're older. The senior population is the largest growing population of cannabis users, right? We don't need older people falling down. There's one thing that I work on a lot as a personal trainer is helping people maintain balance as they age. And it's really important that they don't fall because as you get older, you're just more prone to breaking bones and having some significant damage from a fall. So you don't want to be wobbly. You want that tolerance to build in your motor control, but you don't want the tolerance in your pain, sleep, euphoria, that kind of thing, right? So what do we do? And this is where I want to offer a suggestion and a consideration that might change tolerance completely. And it's the same exact suggestion I give when we talk about overeating. And that is slowing down and being intentional. Because here's what I notice. I notice that this even happens to me from time to time. I notice, especially with inhaling, it's really easy to get into a habit that it must be like smoking cigarettes, where it's just like you pick it up, you puff, you put it down. You pick it up, you puff, you put it down. And that just repeats over and over and over again because it's a habit, not because I'm paying attention to how I feel. And the exact same thing happens with food, right? How many times have you gotten a pint of ice cream out of the freezer and started eating it, and all of a sudden you realize that time has passed and you're at the bottom of the container, right? It's that same mindless action. So one thing we can do to help tolerance is to just pause, slow down, be more aware. Really pay attention to every time you consume. I do love edibles for this reason, because you can be really intentional with edibles because they take so much longer to take effect. It tends to automatically slow us down. So you take one, you have to wait a good hour and a half to see what the effects are going to be. So that gives you a chance to go on with your day, right? And do other things and just sort of listen for what's going on in your body and see. And then, knowing that if you take more, it's going to take another hour and a half to set in, right? So it's a lot slower process. Whereas inhaling, and again, I'm not anti-inhaling. I love my little Lobo, my Planet of the Vapes Lobo. I love it for quick relief. I love it for practicality. But I don't love that it's easy to not pay attention. So one of my biggest thing about tolerance is slowing down, because again, it's that same principle that we work on with mindless eating, is just being a lot more intentional and really asking yourself when you go to pick up your vape, pen, blunt, joint, whatever, bong, what am I trying to get out of this? What am I actually feeling right this second? Do I really need that hit? Just ask yourself that. You don't have to stop. I'm not forcing you to just cold turkey try to use less. I'm asking you to consider. I'm asking you to just be aware of what's going on in your body. Just to pause, right? That's how we fix overeating too. It's not about cold turkey, not eating sugar straight for the rest of your life. It's about pausing and having awareness. And that's the secret to eating in moderation. And that's the secret to consuming cannabis in moderation. It's listening to your body. It's just stopping and asking yourself, what do I really need? What am I really feeling? I do this all the time, like especially when we're kind of chilling at night and I've got my vape and I'll puff, and I really have to stop and feel what's going on and just enjoy the ride of it, or the euphoria of it, or the focus on the show that's making me giggle. I really have to stop and be in the moment and be present. Now, fortunately, cannabis is excellent at keeping you present. So you actually have a leg up in intentional cannabis use. So you use that, harness that ability to be present and be in your body and just feel what's going on before you reach for it again and just keep puffing. Paying attention to how much you're using too. Now, I use a dry herb vape, so I use these little capsules. So I have a pretty precise dose of what I make, but I do measure how much of THC goes in, how much of CBG goes in, how much of CBD goes in. And you can do the same thing with whatever device or contraption or edible you're using. But just be mindful. Like, okay, I'm taking half an edible. Half an edible makes me feel XYZ, right? Half an edible makes me feel XYZ. How does that feel? Right? And then the next day you can say, you know what? Half an edible is just great. Let me just take half an edible and see how I feel, right? Before we assume that we need more. Sometimes it's stopping being present and paying attention that makes us realize, oh, I don't actually need to puff anymore at all. I can just put this away. I feel really good. And this is going to be enough to get me through to fall asleep, and I'm good, right? So we are oftentimes mindlessly using more than we think. So slowing down, paying attention, being intentional, pausing, that pause, I talk a lot about the pause when we talk about mindful eating as well, is everything, pausing and connecting to your body. But again, I mentioned this earlier, CBD, 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 CBD. I'm going to say it till I'm blue in the face. CBD, or if you've been following me for a while, you know I love CBG. G is in go. CBG is similar to CBD. It's just got slightly different properties, but same effects, same counterbalance of THC. So it does bring the high down a little bit, right? But it's a more even and balanced feeling, right? It does help with pain still. It does help with sleep. And here's the connection. Again, CBD and THC work better together. THC reduces pain signaling, right? The sensation of pain. CBD reduces inflammation. They work together. How about that, right? Reduce inflammation, reduce pain signaling. Sleep. THC helps you fall asleep. CBD helps you stay asleep, right? It's magic. A whole night. You got the whole thing using it together. So try balanced products. Try a balanced edible. Find a 1-to-1 where it's equal parts. Maybe it's 10 milligrams of CBD, 10 milligrams of THC. Try it. See what happens. I bet you'll be surprised that you still feel the euphoria or the relaxation that you were going for in a little bit gentler way. And that's going to slow down your tolerance big time. Because I constantly use a blend of CBG and THC, my tolerance is the same all the time. I really don't see an increase in tolerance over time. So I relax about it too. And that just makes life so much easier. It's like relaxing about eating finally after all those years of worrying like, oh, I had bread. I had a sandwich. Oh my gosh, what's going to happen? I had a sandwich. I had bread. Oh my gosh. I had pizza. What's going to happen? I had pizza, freaking out. I had a square of dark chocolate, and we can all relate to that. I think if you've ever tried to manage your weight and worried about what you're eating. Same thing with cannabis. I don't want you to have to worry about creating tolerance. I want you to use it with ease and be confident. And these are some of the tricks that you can implement to really manage your tolerance. But also, again, remembering that tolerance isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's simply an adaptation, and we want adaptation in our body. And there are scenarios where it works to your advantage. So this is exactly what I just am so passionate about helping people with, and that's why I created CannaFit, and that's why I created the coaching program that I offer, and I have an upcoming Munchie Makeover group program that's going to come out soon. And if you follow me on socials, I've been talking a lot about the Munchie myth, and I wrote a book about it, so you can grab your free copy of the book if you want. Just you can email me. It's Beth@cannafitnessnutrition.com, or you can reach me on Instagram. I'm Beth_CannaFitnessNutrition, and I'd be happy to give you a copy of my free book. But thanks again for listening. And if this would be helpful for someone else, please share it, right? Like, subscribe, share. Is that what they say? Anyway, thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time.